Welcome to the Silverline Relaunch, and this is episode number 54. And what an episode this is going to be. I have Chase Chewning with me, and when you hear the way he describes his relaunches, from being in the active service for 6 years, he had to be medically discharged, 2 surgeries, multiple surgeries, but 2 times he had to learn how to walk again. His father passing away with ALS, and all of the journeys in between that have led him to where he is today. His voice is one that will definitely be impactful for you. Also, not to mention, he's got the bomb of the voice. I mean, this guy has the voice. He should be on every single radio show, every single podcast out there. But I enjoyed it so much. I hope you get as much out of it as I did. So let's have the conversation begin. You're listening to the Silver-Lined Relaunch, and I'm your host, Hillary DeCesar, award-winning entrepreneur and transitional coach. Each week, I'll invite you to tune into inspirational stories, revealing how you too can turn ordinary experiences into the extraordinary. Feeling stuck? I'll share step-by-step strategies to fuel your ability to experience a life where silver linings are both abundant and possible. Welcome to the Silver-Lined Relaunch. And today I have Chase Chewning on with me, and this is going to be quite the show. He has done so much with podcasting, with inspiring people out there in all directions. And you, everyone listening in, are going to have a rare opportunity to hear about some of his relaunches and how he's been able to capture and continue to move forward. And there's always silver linings, right? So Chase, welcome. Welcome to the show. So happy you're here.
Hillary, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. We got to connect not that long ago for my show. And this is what I love about this platform and storytelling in general is you get one side of an experience, and then, you get to stay involved with other people's lives and just build relationships and share stories and, help everybody, listening in your audience and mine. So thank you for having me.
It's so great. And what I always love to do is start to talk about the relaunch, the one that has been really, truly the most impactful for you, and the one that perhaps people don't really know a lot about. And that's what makes you, you. And a lot of
Mhm.
times, what people see on the outside is not necessarily
Yeah.
all of the things that you've done to be where you are today. So, can you take us through your relaunch, the one that you really feel, hey, this impacted my life?
Yeah, I love your whole philosophy and terminology around relaunch. It fits very, very well with mine. And it's just this constant, decision to move forward, ever forward. That's my philosophy. And when I look back in my life, when I look back at my personal life, professional life, over really the last, wow, I'm getting up there in age now. It's been, I guess, about, 15 years. There are 3 major kind of relaunches that come to mind. And the one that stands out the most that I think your audience would appreciate hearing more about is the one that probably broke me the most. It's one that left me mostly physically incapacitated, emotionally incapacitated, just, and it's even more ironic because around that time, it was about this time in my life when I had a lot going for me. I was really going up in my job at the time. I had a lot of potential there. I was not only climbing that corporate ladder, so to speak, but I was very, very happy and fulfilled in what I was doing. I had great quality relationships in my life. I was in a very long-term, serious, committed relationship. I was really reestablishing a lot of relationships, really my family relationships that I felt I didn't get to stay on top of during my time in the military. I was back home. I was growing my career. I was in grad school. I was the strongest I had ever been. I was the leanest I'd ever been. And then all of a sudden, over the course of a couple months during this one summer in 2015, pretty much all of that came to a grinding stop. I was rather not dealing with a lot of things in my life that the more I tried to make everything on the outside all shiny and perfect and, look well manicured, all those other bad decisions and lack of decisions and dealing with things in my life kind of rose up and reared its ugly head and left me in a very, very kind of dark place. My relationships began to crumble. My job I was questioning. I didn't know if I fully enjoyed it as much because I kind of hit out of nowhere this big blockade, if you will. And I began to experience strong disconnect emotionally. Like I said, I was in the peak of my training and peak of performance and aesthetics, but I was really denying my emotional health, my mental health. And I began to experience very severe panic attacks and PTSD triggers from time in the military and this horrific loss of losing my father. And a lot of things that I just chose to not deal with caught up
Mm.
with me. And it brought me to my knees, quite literally. And it was during that time, that rebuild time, I chose to really lean into these things
Mm.
and deal with them, but also to completely embody them and to use them not as just an excuse, but my entire reason for what I wanted to do and how I wanted to live my life moving forward. So I took all those things, rebuilt my life, and relaunched everything. My career escalated.
Okay,
My
hold
training,
on, because
all the
hold
things.
on, we're zipping through this a little much. Okay, so we got to back it up a bit.
Oh,
So
sure.
you're saying 2015 things were going incredibly well for you, and you kind of had everything going on, but then you had this darkness about you,
Mhm.
and it started to truly, as you said, this dark place, and you had panic attacks and some of the military experiences, losing your father. Those things started to emotionally impact you,
Oh, uncontrollably. It was just coming out of left field. Yeah.
and it was coming out at you, and it was debilitating to the point where you couldn't get out of your own head, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's one of those things where call it military training, call it ignorance, call it ego, maybe a hodgepodge of all of those things.
Yeah.
I thought that I was doing fine by just suppressing it, by just saying these things don't serve me. I don't need to focus on them, or I can just skirt around them.
Mm.
Well, no, that wasn't the case. The body keeps the score, as they say. Trauma will find a way eventually to come back into your life, and the people and relationships and things in your life that maybe you're taking for granted or just not nurturing as well as you thought. They also have breaking points, and all of these things I experienced during just this one amazing, fun summer of my life where I got to rebuild all aspects.
So when the body keeps score and all of a sudden something, happens, was it the straw that broke the camel's back? Was there one thing? I'm hearing lots and lots of different
Mhm.
things, but was there a final, like, oh my God, and then as you said, you just, like, things just started to fall apart? Or was it this progression, this small build that finally just had you, kind of at this point?
Honestly, Hillary, is a little bit of both, but if I have to get really honest, and I will,
Mm.
it was really kind of just this one thing that kind of just broke the camel's back, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to
Mm.
speak. And I was watching this movie with my then girlfriend, now wife. And this was one of the relationships during the time that was very much up in the air. We were going through some stuff.
See, and
And
I love that already. We already know, like, spoiler alert, it worked out. But
we
okay, let's go back.
we
And
figured
you're
it out.
watching the movie. Okay.
And there was this death scene where this character passed away, or this character's relative or something, and it was like a hospital kind of scene, and they were on a gurney, and like the sheet, and in slow motion, kind of just carried them over the body, and it was a death scene. And immediately it took me back in time to when I experienced that with my father. He
Mm.
passed away from a terminal illness, a very, very cruel disease, an escalated case of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And I was thankfully there literally his last days, last hours of being alive. And that was the big emotional trauma for me, that any years leading up to this point, like I was saying, it was kind of a little bit of this, both things you're talking about, where anytime a death scene would come up in a movie or a song would come on the radio that him and I used to rock out to, I would just be completely taken out of my mind and my body, and just I would have severe panic attacks. We couldn't go out. I would have to leave movie theaters. Certain songs, like I said, would have me swerving off the road when I was driving. And it was this one scene where it was just the worst, or a very, very severe panic attack, one of the worst I'd had in a long time. And next thing I knew, I blacked out. My girlfriend then was like literally trying to shake me, revive me, and just like snap out of it. And it was a big kind of culmination because it was a reminder of what I had not focused on, what I was depriving in my healing journey. This mental health aspect that I really needed to work on. But it also came from a place of love from her, because it was also a big, big area of concern for her and our relationship, because this wasn't the first time this had happened. And when you love someone like that much, like you want them to be better in all areas of their life. But
You were
if
saying it wasn't your first time having a panic attack.
no, no,
Okay.
no,
So
and not
she
with
had
her.
seen this and she knew, hey, this can't be
Yeah.
good for you. This is, but this time you passed out. It went to that
Yeah. Yeah.
extreme.
She's like, "Hey, if we are gonna progress and we're gonna work through things
Mhm.
together, we also are here to work on things individually. And, your mental health and your emotional health and like your sanity really, and your ability to go through life and not be constantly triggered like this is a big component of what I want you to work on for yourself, but also knowing that we can come back together and we can progress in life together." And
Hey,
so
no wonder you married her. She sounds like an amazing person. The fact that she recognized this, knew you needed,
yeah.
you knew you needed to actually focus in, have that relaunch around getting yourself back,
And
right?
it wasn't from a selfish point of view. You're absolutely right. It was very mindful, and I realized this at the moment, that this was something that was holding me back personally,
Mhm.
holding me back professionally. I could train and do all the things and anything that I wanted to, but the body was going to remind me of areas that I was denying. And then I recognized too, sometimes like it would completely throw me off professionally. Like I said, going into work, if I heard this song or a favorite band that my dad and I used to have, and it would just completely derail me from the day. And I, at the time, was a clinical health coach, and my job is to show up and to be there for people that are relying on me to improve their health and wellness. And I wasn't showing up my fullest self, and I couldn't help them to my fullest capability until I took care of my own self. So it was this final thing of, hey, you need to fix this kind of one thing so that all of the things can get better, and you
Oh,
relaunch
so
accordingly.
when we had our last conversation, we talked about it, your dad passing, my mom passing, very, very similar, like how it really rocked our world. And when you talk about being a clinical health coach and you're showing up where you're crumbling on the inside, you're sitting here, you're saying one thing, but it's the opposite that's happening on the inside. I can't even imagine how out of alignment you actually were at that point.
Mm.
How? And I'm asking for myself and for others listening to this, how did you do it? What were the processes? What was the first step in first acknowledging, yeah, you woke up from a severe panic attack. Your girlfriend is like, hey, you got to do something about this. What'd you do?
Well, I kind of came to the realization that how I was going about problem solving, right here, air quote, this wasn't working. I could no longer not deal with this. I could no longer face it. Like everything else in my life, and we haven't gotten to it, but maybe just not yet. Like my physical rehabilitation, I went through a string of very severe injuries in the military. I wound up medically discharged. I had to learn how to walk again twice due to serious reconstruction of both my hips. And so like I'd done the work before. It was, hey, heal, rehabilitate, put in the reps, and get back on the horse kind of thing. But for whatever reason, when it's not a physical ailment, a physical injury, it was a lot easier to suppress. And so I realized that I was not putting in the reps with this area of my life.
Oh,
And
that is so good. Not putting in the reps. And because it wasn't physical, because it
yeah,
was emotional, you're treating it completely different in terms of the rehab.
it's because we don't see it, right? Or we choose not to see it. And we can just stuff it off in the corner or choose to deal with it later because it's not like that nagging final 5 pounds of fat, or it's not that, 5 pound increment on the barbell for a new PR. It's less tangible, it's less visible, but it is just as, if not even more visceral if we ignore it. And so I kind of had this just big realization. And so I really wanted to, I wanted to make my relationship work. I wanted my job to work. I wanted me to work. I wanted all of these things to work properly. And so I just had to face the truth of how I was going about things was not working. And if I wanted all these other areas of my life to, some of them to at least just be there, but definitely to be improved upon, I had to do something different. And so all the years of the external work of training, of rehabilitating, of transitioning from military, out into the corporate world again, I paused a lot of that external work and finally went inward. And this is when I got into the woo. I began journaling. I began listening to podcasts, and I began the whole personal development, self-help journey.
Okay, so hold on. You are a manly man. Like
Well, thank you.
people who have seen your pictures, these images, the outside sounds like his voice. It's amazing.
We're trying. We're trying.
Yeah, but here's the thing. When we start talking about, inner sizing, that, working on the inner,
I love that term. That's great. Yeah.
everything going on, somehow that doesn't seem to fit with the image of masculinity and being all together. And so how did you kind of like come to be a journaler and the woo side of this, and realizing that you had to go inside in order to have your world change on the outside?
Well, it's like they say, the first step in anything is awareness. And that first realization for me was huge of, like I said, how I was going about things was no longer serving me. And it was not serving me in the way that I would like to, or I was no longer okay with. So I had to really kind of just start there. And then like I said, I was turning to just trying to learn things in a lot of different ways. And so I began to just look at and listen and read people, mentors, heroes of mine differently. And so when I would look at these people, these influencers, these authors, these writers, and I would get a lot of information and knowledge from them in terms of, hey, here's some ways, some easy ways to pack on 10 pounds of muscle this year, or here's training protocols to bust through your plateau. I would then hear them talk about, oh, the biggest revelation in my life, the thing that's helped me, in all areas or a specific area of my life is meditation, is taking a walk, is inserting stillness into my day, is journaling. It, it was like it was always there, but for whatever reason, I wasn't ready to hear it. And so I began to just kind of look at and read and interpret these men and mentors and people through a different lens. And I was just like, all right, well, why, hell, let me just try it. If this person that I have learned so much from thus far is telling me to just get out a piece of paper and write my thoughts and feelings, that sounds pretty straightforward. I can do that. And that's exactly what I did. Hillary, my big jump into personal development was walking out of my apartment at the time. I was living with my brother in Arlington, Virginia, right on the cusp of Virginia and DC. And I walked maybe 2 blocks to a CVS on the corner. I got this like $4 or $5 marble cover Mead notebook. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. They see it when they go back to school shopping. And I just picked it up. I got a pen and I began every morning. I made up a ritual. I would just wake up and I would just brain dump. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but once I got started, it was unbelievable. The things that were just pouring out. I would sometimes look down at what I was writing and I was like, where the hell did this come from? I have these feelings. I have suppressed these emotions. I didn't know. And it was there. I just needed to pause, have this sense of awareness, look inward, and just open up the door a little bit. And it all just came pouring out. I mean, the answers didn't come pouring out, but the questions I needed to be asking and the areas of my life that I needed to be focusing on were completely illuminated. And so then the work began.
Well, and they say ask better questions and
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
get better answers. So it
Or just
really does.
ask any question sometimes, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Ask any. And what I like about what you started with was, you thought, why not? Let's just try it. And I think that for so many people, when they're deep into the kind of that negative relaunch and things start to spiral, and one bad thing is leading to another, and we know our thoughts dictate what's going to happen in the outside, and what you think today shows up tomorrow. What I love is that it was almost like this concept of, well, what I'm doing right now is not working.
The
So,
common denominator is me in all of this.
and
Exactly.
so let's try it. let's try this, these far-fetched ideas to you at that time. Now we realize after doing it, it's like you live for it, right? You live for the
Yeah.
journaling, you live for the meditation, you live like, can I just do more of that? But at the beginning, it 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 is that, it's like when you go out and you start working out, the first few times is painful.
Exactly. It's uncomfortable, it's unfamiliar. Literally, your brain is having to pause and go, "What are you doing? We've never done this before. We have no connections to this. This is unfamiliar." And so not only, the ego and the external self is, "This is new, this is uncomfortable, this is weird," but we have a lot of biochemistry at that point, I'll even say, working against us. And it just takes, like I said earlier, it just takes a little bit of time and pushing through that initial uncomfortableness to put in the reps, to build the familiarity, to completely rewire your emotions and rebuild a new lifestyle and your entire habits around everything and relaunch.
And the way I refer to it is, this concept of I
Mm,
am not a meditator. I am not a journaler. Again, those are beliefs,
yeah.
right? And I call them bugs, beliefs underground surfacing. And so we can exterminate those guys
Mm,
by saying, what if you were? What if you actually started to journal? What would the worst thing that happens to you be? And that's what I say. Hey,
mm,
if you were to try it, what's the worst thing? And so for you, it ended up changing your life. I mean, you talk about the silver
yeah.
lining. Can you tell us about what started to happen?
So initially, like I said, with the big thing that I was working on at the time, besides myself, was my relationship, and that was a big thing that I could share with her to say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm working on with myself, and here's what I'm doing that I think it's working for us." And so it was groundbreaking work for us. Like I said, we figured it out. We're happily married now for over like almost 5 years, and so that kind of just began to be the catalyst, and it was the stepping stone to the next thing, to the next thing, and it caused me to really question a lot in my life of what if, what if. It was almost like being reborn.
Mm,
It's like stepping out of the matrix, right? You look at the world, everything differently, because you begin to see possibility. You begin to see
mm,
even just small 1% changes in your life that you thought were just standards, that I don't have to accept this anymore. I don't have to accept this from people. I don't have to accept this from my coworkers. I don't have to accept this in my relationships. More importantly, I don't have to accept this for myself or from myself. And so then, I mean, honestly, it helped me build up the courage, really, to go back and seek professional help. I had been on again, off again with a therapist for years, going through the work with my father, family stuff, personal stuff, military stuff. And so I went back on a regular basis for a few months. And that, coupled with the work I was doing for myself, was instrumental. It was completely necessary. Um, and then, really, the ultimate thing that I did was, besides asking these new questions, was I realized that, look, at the core of all of this, besides me, the common denominator is me. The common denominator, really, in all of this stuff, was my association to that loss of my dad, and it rocked my world. He passed away when I was 19. I'd only been away from home for like barely 2 years. I was becoming this young man. I was in the military. I was following in his footsteps of military service, and it was a big challenge to my identity. And so what I realized was that's never going away. He's not coming back as much as I would love it. So I really need to completely change. I need to develop a better relationship or better skills and coping mechanisms to handle what happens when you're at a movie theater and a death scene comes up. What happens when a loved one in your family or your wife's family now passes away or becomes sick? Like, these are things that I just have to accept. And so instead of running from this loss and this trauma that I did for, at that point, about 10 years, um, personal work, professional work, and then I consciously chose to, I'm going to just bear hug this mofo. I'm going to completely embody him and his memory and his legacy and his mantra. And luckily for me, my dad actually did have a mantra. Besides just how he lived his life, and just this beaming, glowing, hilarious icon in our community, the small little town of Virginia, and just the glue of our family, he had these two words: ever forward. It was actually a creed, this kind of saying that he picked up from his time in the military, his first duty station, his first unit. Every unit you're in, at least in the military, in the army, excuse me, we have a saying. And he was assigned to the 116th Infantry Regiment, the small little guard unit out of Virginia, and it was ever forward. And it dates back all the way to like the American Revolution. And so I was like, damn, that's really cool. Like it's this phrase I've heard ever since I was a kid. He would always say it and be it. And I was just like, cool, dad, like cool phrase. All of us were like, okay, that's nice. That's awesome. That's very optimistic. And so I decided to latch on to that. As I'm talking out loud, it kind of reminds me of like Batman, like in Batman Begins, when Bruce Wayne decides to just turn to the darkness and embody the thing that he was so afraid of and that drove his life in a negative way. He
Mm.
chose to completely embody it and be it. And so that's what I did. And honestly, it has helped me tremendously in the last now 6, 7 years to,
What does ever forward mean to you?
ever forward to me. I used to think, and really just up to the last few months, I used to think that it was just a great way of finding a silver lining. It was just a familial catchphrase and a way that I could stay kind of tethered to my father. And it still does in a way, but it has gone from something that I can use to anchor myself in a positive light to the past to the possibility of what is going on in the future. It is just a reminder through overcoming that, like I just explained, of that trauma in my life, of overcoming my physical limitations from my injuries, to overcoming, going from corporate America to launching my own business now, and knock on wood, still doing okay 4 years later, to a thriving, very happy, fulfilled marriage, and having so many great relationships in my life. To just look at every day what is possible if we choose to just keep the ball moving forward. Like it has to be a conscious choice every day, and most days are very difficult to do that.
Well, and I think everyone listening is like, okay, Hillary, this is clearly your Wonder Twin. And for those that don't know, Wonder Twin powers, form
Unite, right?
of, yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm feeling like the form of just, powerhouse of possibility right here. God, it just feels so good. Okay. So where has this led you now? What are you working on? Share with us what's going on for you now that you've had this true silver lining, this evolutionary process, e- ever forward, right? Where are you and what are you doing?
So these days, I'm doing this. I've transitioned out, like I said, from being a full-time clinical health coach. In late 2017, I left, and had launched my podcast at the time, Ever Forward Radio. I was like, well, if I'm going to do this thing, what better way than to embody that message, like I said. And I began to kind of just double down on that. In 2018, I launched my own online health coaching business, Ever Forward Coach. And then about summer 2019, I just decided to completely lean into this space of podcasting and content creation. And so that's what I've done. And my show, Everforward Radio, what my brother does, he runs Everforward Apparel here, if you're watching the video. And now it's just completely shifted into what can we do to grow personally and individually, and that legacy item with our father. But it has been so gratefully well received all over the world that it's now like it's a movement. The
Mm.
show and the content and the apparel and everything that we do, that my family attaches a name to, and these two words, we're now in the reach of tens of millions, and it's unreal. So I am very grateful for the opportunities I have now to show up into my world. Is still very much health and wellness, personal development. That's everything you're going to hear me talk about on the podcast. And so I shifted out, like I said, in summer 2019, from the coach chase model to just podcast chase model. And so you're going to hear me talk all
So
things
great.
fitness, nutrition, mindset, have great conversations with people like yourself recently on the show. And so, yeah, I show up to create content, have conversations, develop storytelling for everybody else out there that needs to hear the message that I needed to hear so many times years ago, to hopefully help them skip to the front of the line, so to speak, of healing and their own personal development, and just realizing what is possible if they just ask a different or better question.
Ever forward, get relaunch ready.
There we go. Yeah.
Perfect. God, I love it. Okay, so what I always do at the end of our show is I always go ahead and do a little rapid fire. Are you
All
ready?
right. I
Okay.
qualified expert in the military, so hopefully I can
Oh, you're going to be
we'll
really
keep
good
it
at
up
this.
here.
Ooh, I should have thought about even harder ones. Okay. I would like to know, how many resumes did your dog send out today? Okay. For those that don't follow
True,
Chase,
a true fan. I love it. A true friend.
for those that don't follow him on his social media, he always looks at his dog and
Can
hey.
I tell you something real quick, Hillary? The video you can see, this is exactly that's what I'm dealing with right there.
The dog right now is passed out asleep in its little
That is
doggy chair.
so that is
Oh
my
my
dog
God,
Nella,
I
and
had to throw that one out.
she's still at
Okay.
0 to my knowledge.
Okay. Who has been your favorite person so far to interview on your show and why? And I know you want to say me, but you can't.
Well, yeah, I can't say you, right? We gotta move on past the obvious. Um, I will say one of the people that always sticks out to in my mind, and I've loved everybody that's been on the show. Some stick with me more than others, of course, but um, Lisa Bilyeu. Lisa Bilyeu is the co-founder of Quest Nutrition. She runs the show Women of Impact. Her husband Tom Bilyeu runs Impact Theory, very big in the podcast, personal development space. And I interviewed her a couple of years ago. She's been on the show twice now, and I've never met anyone, of course, present company excluded, who is just that open and honest and vulnerable, but just
Mhm.
the warmest, kindest, loving human being that at the level she is and what she's accomplished in her life, she doesn't have to make as much time for other people as she did and does for me. They've been great new friends ever since the show. And so she's just the kindest human I think I've ever met.
You know what? I've never known karma to ever kick anyone in the ass. When
Mm,
you give, you get, right? Cause and
absolutely.
effect. So I love that's an awesome one. Okay. Uh, Something people would be surprised to hear about you.
Hmm. Oh, wow.
Ooh, I think I've stumped
Done, done.
the
Well,
infinite.
I mean, there are quite a few things. This last like 6, 8 months of my life have been I've been challenging a lot of things, a lot of parameters in my life. Maybe they might know this, maybe not. I'm a huge rule follower. You may look at me and I think someone in the more creative space, content creator, creator space, is very much just like open to everything and just all rainbows and butterflies and everything, just whatever floats your boat. But I'm very, very structured, very, very regimented. Even yes, I get to technically wake up and do whatever I want, I guess, but like everything for me has a rule and a reason. And yeah, maybe the old habits die hard. I've been
I
at
was
it.
going to say, being, in the
Yeah.
military, yeah, I could see how you'd follow rules. That which
Yeah.
is good.
I
And
don't know that many other
lucky for your wife.
creators that are. Yeah, right.
Okay, so you have a very successful radio show, and lots of people are thinking about getting into the podcast business.
Mm.
What would be a top tip that you would say if you're getting into the podcast space that you should really think about?
I used to say when you're ready to podcast launch, have at least 4 in the can, ready to go, stay a month ahead. Honestly, the way that I've seen even just my workflow now, doing this for 4 years, and everybody else that I help in the podcasting space, you'll get 10 done. Get 10 episodes done, completely recorded, edited, done, and then go into your launch mode. Then publish to Apple Podcast, then do all the things, because especially now with the popularity and rising respect and growth of this platform, and just the stressors of life, like life happens, reschedules
Mhm.
happen, tweaks and edits and changes will happen. So do yourself and your sanity a favor, get 10 done, ready to go, and then go about your launch.
And how many do you recommend putting out there per week?
It's good to start with once a week. When you're going into a launch, I always recommend still to do a trailer episode and your full episode one. So that it's kind of like the Netflix model. You want to go live with your trailer first so people can get a little taste, but then they immediately want more, especially if it's something new, right? So give them your trailer and your full episode one when you go live, and then just weekly after that. And I did that for the first year. I didn't go into twice a week until year 2. I did 3 episodes a week in year 3. So until you can prove to yourself and your workflow and your audience that you can maintain consistency,
Mhm.
just stick to 1 a week, bare minimum.
Totally makes sense. Okay. For those that don't know about Clubhouse, it is an audio type of social network. It is taking off. And the question I would ask you is, who would you want to do a Clubhouse with right now?
Right now, well, my go-to for like, hey, who would you want to collaborate with on anything is always Ryan Holiday. One of my favorite living American authors. Back to my summer 2015, you know, relaunch. You know, his works, his books, "Obstacle is the Way," "Ego is the Enemy," were all very, very crucial parts of my journey. I would love to converse with him now, but honestly, I recently wrapped up Matthew McConaughey's audiobook, Green Lights. Holy hell, amazing, amazing.
I just started it. Yes, I
what
agree. Yep.
entertaining journey. I would just love
Yep.
to just,
And
hear
he
it
and he
talk.
has such a great voice as well.
He acts it out entirely. It's 11 out of 10.
Yeah, don't I wouldn't do the book. I would do the audio.
Audio. Yep.
Yeah, without a doubt. Good, great. And then the last question I always ask is what, and which is so perfect because you've already addressed it, and you and I again are, wonder twins. But what does a powerhouse of possibility mean to you?
A powerhouse of possibility. It means that, particularly the word powerhouse, it means that, when we look at possibility, it means it's an automatic just 11 out of 10. Like I was saying before, powerhouse of possibility. Yes, a lot of things in life in this world are possible, but not all things that are possible are fun, are valuable, or are entertaining. And so I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people when they're looking to relaunch anything in their life of new possibilities, right? Well, you got to kind of attach a higher meaning, something enticing and exciting to that. So think bigger, dream bigger, relaunch bigger, create something, think of something, work towards something that is possible, but also a powerhouse. Like, don't just do something, like do something that's going to be freaking amazing,
Mhm.
that you're going to be able to completely step into fully. Don't just do something. One of my favorite shows, Parks and Recreation, and this is something I need to always remind myself of too. Don't half-ass two things, whole ass one thing, right? Shout out Ron Swanson.
That's right. So on that note, don't whole ass anything. You go all in. Chase, what a pleasure. I loved having you on.
My
Thank
honor.
you
Thank
so
you.
much. Yeah, super, super awesome. And I look forward to collaborating with you in the future for sure.
Anytime. Let me know. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Silver Lined Relaunch. If I said something today that resonated with you, will you please head over to iTunes right now and leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with others and help them find the silver linings as well. And don't forget, you can have immediate access to the show notes, any giveaways, and the links to those amazing beauty products at therelaunchco.com/podcast. Until next time, there's always a silver lining, and now is the time to hit the reset button to relaunch those transitions into transformations.